Hello there, Homeschool Nolan here to help you navigate learning in the digital age. Summertime is here, and for most kids, it means a break from school. But if you're a homeschooler, the learning never stops. And if you became a homeschooling family last year due to the pandemic, you're probably wondering now, as we emerge from the pandemic, whether to send your child back to school. Now, the pandemic has changed the world in many ways. It's changed the way we work, the way we relate to each other, and it's also changed the way we learn. It's forced us to be more creative and resourceful. And because of that, I'd like to share with you today why I believe that even as schools reopen this fall, why now is still the time for homeschooling. To begin with, a one-size-fits-all approach to education just won't cut it anymore in the digital age. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first you have to understand that the public school system, as we know it today in America, was for the most part created back in the 1840s by a man named Horace Mann. Horace Mann was the state of Massachusetts' first Secretary of Education. He himself grew up poor and was mostly self-educated himself. Yet, he was a staunch believer of universal and free public education provided by the state. He argued that a young republic, such as the United States, could not remain free if its citizens were ignorant and illiterate, and it needed public schools for everyone, and that such schools should be provided by the state and taught by well-trained professional teachers. The public school system he helped create certainly made sense for the times. The young republic needed a school system that could make sure voters weren't ignorant or illiterate. It needed schools that could teach reading, writing, and arithmetic to masses of workers who could then go work in the factories at the dawn of the industrial age. It was the right system for a young country entering the industrial age. But times have certainly changed since the 1800s. We no longer live in an industrial age economy where factories mass-producing products need mass-produced workers from schools, all with pretty much the same skill sets. Today, in the 21st century, there are literally tens of thousands of jobs that didn't even exist in 1840. Jobs like computer programmer, electrician, brain surgeon, and they're working in fields that didn't exist just decades ago, like renewable energy or even social media influencer. The sheer number of different types of jobs that exist today and career paths in the digital age means that individualized instruction and learning is more important than ever. And this is something that homeschooling does very well. Homeschooling gives you the opportunity to create a learning curriculum best suited for your individual child's needs, gifts, and ambitions. So if providing more individualized instruction and learning for your own child is important to you, now is still the time for homeschooling. Our society is also incredibly more diverse now than it was back in the 1840s. And I'm not just talking about skin color. I'm also talking about diversity of cultures, religion, and ideas. For example, you may have heard of a debate raging at school board meetings across the country today over something called critical race theory, and how parents across the country seem divided over this. Many teachers seem to be for it, while many parents are against it. Now, I'm not here to argue for or against critical race theory. There are plenty of other videos on YouTube where you can find this debate. But what I will say is that the debate alone over this issue clearly illustrates how the one-size-fits-all model of public schools trying to promote one particular perspective on a complex issue just won't do anymore. Parents, for the most part, want schools to teach their kids how to read, write, and do math. But many of them do not want schools teaching or promoting a particular agenda, especially if it goes against their own cultural or religious values. And that's another important reason why now is still the time for homeschooling. On top of that, working from home this past year has made learning from home much easier. One of the biggest barriers to homeschooling is that it requires a parent's physical presence at home. This is obviously difficult if the parent has to leave the home to go to work. But the pandemic made working from home the new normal. During the pandemic, employers discovered that workers can actually be happier and more productive when given the option to work from home. So much so that this trend of working from home is expected to continue even as the pandemic dies down. I know, speaking for myself, I would have never considered homeschooling were not for the fact that I was able to work from home during the pandemic. But don't get me wrong, I'm still working full time, and my wife still does most of the actual homeschooling. But it makes a huge difference if I can even just take 1 hour out of my day to teach a lesson on science or history, or regularly check on my son to see how he's doing, to make sure he's actually doing assignments in language arts and mathematics rather than playing chess all day. Just being physically present can make a huge difference for your family, and it also helps when it comes to coordinating with my wife to send our kids and picking them up from private tutoring lessons, music classes, and learning centers. Working from home has definitely made learning from home much easier. And that's why I believe that even as we emerge from the pandemic, that homeschools will eventually become just as common as home offices. So if you became a homeschooler during the pandemic like we did, and are now wondering whether to send your child back to school, have faith that now is still the time for homeschooling. The world will probably never completely return to the way it was back in 2019. The pandemic forced many of us to become more creative and resourceful while we were stuck at home. And many of the good habits we developed will still continue. People will continue to work and learn from home. Now is still the time for homeschooling. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.